My problem is that secular Israelis define Judaism as orthodox so that they could reject it.
Most of this country didn't turn to them to say, hey, why didn't you fight bravely until your last drop of blood? Most of this country said, thank God you're alive because we have lost so much.
First, get out of Efrat. Then get out of Jerusalem. Then get out of Tel Aviv.
There is a way to get to a peace agreement and to a real peace between the sides.
Stop hiding our interests. Like, this is my Jewish interest. This is my Palestinian national interest. We have a common interest that no one talked about.
If you come to me and say there's going to be a two-state solution and Jerusalem's going to belong to the Jewish people, I'm going to say, what are you smoking?
In 50 years, there's no doubt in my mind, there will be a bat mitzvah at the wall. Israel will be leading the Jewish world in innovation in Jewish. We have to do it, otherwise we will perish.
The most important thing at the end of the day is that you know one simple thing. I love Israel. I love Israel. I love this country.
I'm Mark Golub. Welcome to a very, very special edition of Voices of Israel. We're standing right now at the Cave of Machpelah in the heart of Hebron. And what we're going to do is show you something which most Americans, Jew and non-Jew, most Americans have never seen, never experienced. It's only something we've heard described, sometimes in a very critical fashion, about what life here is like and what the interaction is between Jew and Arab living in Hebron is. And what we're going to do is take you around the city, show you the Jewish parts of Hebron, and come back and end up right here at the Cave of Machpelah. And the voice of Israel today is this wonderful gentleman right here, David Wilder, who is spokesperson for Hebron, the Hebron Jewish community. And David is going to take us, where are you going to take us, David?
I'm going to give you a tour of Hebron.
He's going to give us a tour of Hebron. And again, most of us never get to see firsthand what Hebron is all about. Stay with us, and on Voices of Israel today, you'll get a chance to see something perhaps that you've never ever seen or imagined before. How do you want to begin? You want to take us a little bit?
I'm going to right where we're standing right now.
Yeah.
This is where when I begin tours, and I give many tours of Hebron, aside from other things, I always try to begin right here.
Why?
Because as far as I'm concerned, where we're standing right now is the most important place there is in Hebron after Mount Machpelah, the tomb of the Patriarchs and the Matriarchs. Mark, there are 4 Jewish neighborhoods in the city. Where we're starting is the first one. And when I say it's the first one, it's not only the first Jewish neighborhood where we're starting today, it's the first Jewish neighborhood period. This neighborhood has 3 names. It's commonly called Tel Rumeda. The word Rumeda in Arabic has to do with ash, gray. There was a fire here a few thousand years ago and the name stuck. We also call this in Hebrew Admot Ishai, which I'll explain later on. There's another name, which is the real name. A lot of times when I come in here with tourists, they say to me, we go to all these interesting places in Israel, and they're significant, and they're important, they're even holy. They're all tombs. They're where people are buried. We go to the tomb of the Patriarchs and see where Abraham and Sarah are buried. But where did they live? And that's why I like to begin here, because this is Tel Hebron. If the tomb of the Patriarchs is where Abraham is buried, this is where he and Sarah lived almost 4,000 years ago. Today we can see some of it. For example, you see
before you give us 30 seconds, because there actually may be people who are watching, Jew and non-Jew alike, who do not understand the historicity and the historical link of Hebron to the Jewish people. Give us a quick overview, a summary of why Hebron is so important historically to the Jewish people.
4,000 years and 30 seconds. That's good.
Look, 60 seconds.
Look, Hebron is quite literally the first Jewish city in Israel. This is where Abraham came. This is where Abraham came and settled almost 4,000 years ago. And basically, since then, with very few exceptions that we know of, Jews have been here continuously. This is not only where Abraham and Sarah was, all of the patriarchs and matriarchs, Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Leah all lived here. Later we saw here the beginning of the Davidic monarchy. David was here for 7.5 years. He created here, he started here, the kingdom of David. When we talk about the kingdom of Israel, it began here. And we'll see some of that today. Afterwards, during the whole time of the Maccabeans were here, the Bar Kokhba was here, everybody was always here. It was a very, very central point, and of course its centrality is based around what's just a few minutes from here, the tomb of the Patriarchs, Ma'arat Machpelah, which is considered to be the second holiest site to the Jewish people in all the world, second in significance, importance, and sanctity only to Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And for that reason, it's always had a very, very special place in people's hearts. People have always tried to come to pray here, to be here, despite all of the issues and problems. And I'm not talking about the last 40 years. I'm talking about the last 3,000 years. People have always tried to be here. And today, we have a tremendous privilege to be able to walk in the footsteps of Abraham.
So I hope all of you understand this is the wellspring of the Jewish people. This is where we all began in Eretz Israel. And also, hear what David said, this is where the King David began the monarchy. It was not Jerusalem. King David establishes his capital first in Hebron and then moves it later on to Jerusalem. That's a story in and of itself. But that's how important Hebron is. And I think, yeah, you want to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to add one thing. When we talk about the roots of Judaism, of course, it begins here. But there's another more general way to look at Hebron, and that is that it's the roots of all of monotheism. Anybody that believes in one God, be they Jewish or Christian, anybody else, this is where they began. In other words, I look at Hebron as the beginning of humanity. We're leaving a period of barbarism where people used to sacrifice their children, where there was human sacrifice. We're coming into belief in one God. We're coming into to Abraham. And basically, it's the roots of all of humanity.
That's beautifully said, David. All right, now that you have a sense of where we are, how do you want to begin?
I want to show you where we're standing.
Please do.
Because this usually blows people away.
Okay.
We have here a wall. This is a wall that's today about 3 meters high. It used to be 10 meters high. It was about as high as the building. It was 6 meters deep. According to the archaeologists, this wall was built 4,500 years ago. Now, if you take 4,500 years ago, Mark, and you put that on a timeline, we're going back a little bit before Abraham. Most people know the story of Noah and the flood. That's when this was built. Okay, that's the time period we're talking about, the days of Noah. On the right side is another wall, which is a little bit lower today. It's a little bit newer also. It's only 3,700 years old. This is a wall that goes back to the days of Abraham. In Israel, when you go to archaeological sites, there are a lot of walls. What's in between these two walls is actually quite unique. These stairs are over 4,000 years old. They were discovered as you see them. Nobody put them back together again. And these are also over 4,000 years old. Now, the stairs lead, they tell us, from the valley below, going all the way up into the ancient city of Hebron. And what's really interesting is that the archaeologists tell us that if they dug into the street here, where the cars are, going down, they think they would find the gates to Hebron. It's probably an archway, and people would go through those gates into the city. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the most important places there is, certainly here in all of Israel, even though nobody even thinks anything about it. Because when we read in the Bible about how Abraham purchases the caves of Machpelah, it's written twice exactly where that transaction took place. In Hebrew, that's B'sharei Ha'ir, which means the gates of the city. And that's the gates of the city. It's very possible that that's where Abraham stood and bought the caves of Machpelah for the Jewish people almost 4,000 years ago. And what I always find so amazing about that isn't so much that Abraham was there then, but we're still here today.
Yes. By the way,
people live here.
It gives me chills. It gives me chills. Do you understand?
I understand that because I have Jews and non-Jews that stand here, and I say that to them and their jaws drop, but it's true, okay? And when you think about that, how many people can say after 4,000 years we still live where we started? I mean, there are children here, there are fans. It's not a tourist trap. I bring tourists here, but people live here. And this is it. This is where we began, and we're still here today, and that's just, I don't know, that's an idea that I just, I can't get used to that. It's just,
it's marvelous.
It's unbelievable. Come, let me come in, let's go a little bit further in, come. We have here two houses. There's a house in the back corner that's about 4,000 years old, and there's another house in front of us with pillars that's 2,700 years old. 2,700 years old, we're talking about the days of King Hezekiah, first temple period. Now look, you work with media, follow what's going on here. A lot of times people turn on the radio, the news in the morning, whatever the media they look at, and they think that we have problems. I've got news for you. They had problems 2,700 years ago too. You see the third pillar back, top stone, there's a patch of black there. The archaeologists tell us, and that's from the days of Sancheriv. Sancheriv was running around Judea burning down cities. They tell us that's from the fire when Sancheriv burned down Hebron. He came here with his torch out. Now during that period of time, the kingdom used Hebron as a place to store food for the army. They used to store the food in clay jars so big. On the side of the jar was a handle. And on the bottom of the handle, come over here please, just so you can see what I'm talking about. This is a handle. On the side of the handle was a seal. Looked like a beetle or a bird, had wings. And on the top of the seal, it had a word which says Lamelech, to the king, which identifies it as property of the kingdom. Underneath the seal is another word which identifies the place where this is being kept. When these excavations were done, we're talking about 12, 13 years ago, a number of those seals were discovered here, including this one, which I photographed. And on the top of the seal, it has the word Lamelech, and underneath, in ancient Hebrew, has the word Hebron. When these were discovered here, as the archaeologists told us, if anybody had any doubts as to whether this is the authentic biblical Hebron, those doubts have all been erased. They said we have positive proof that Jews have lived here since the days of Abraham. Okay? So you can see it. I mean, you know.
This is your photograph?
This is a photograph of mine, yeah.
And how did you happen to take this photograph?
Because today the seal, which was discovered here, is being kept at a museum in Kiryat Arba. And the fellow who runs the museum was kind enough to show me around a little bit. Took this out of the case, and I took some photographs.
Very nice. Very
so
nice.
this is here, okay? Back over in the corner are wine cisterns that go back 1,500 years. A very small area. We have here 1,500 years, 2,700 years, 3,700 years, 4,500 years. There's one time period here that's missing, and we'll leave that for a few minutes. In a little while, I'll tell you what's not here and why it's not here and where it is. But this is what we have in front of us. Now, the past is very important. What about the present? The neighborhood that we're in right now was actually, first of all, the land here. Just so people, you know, there are a lot of people that think the Jewish history, Hebron starts in 1967. This land here was purchased by Jews in Hebron in 1807. 1807. Purchased in 1807. There was a rabbi named Chaim Bajayo who worked then for the community. He purchased several parcels of land, including up here. Nobody ever lived here. 1984.
So when were these homes built?
Well, that's what we're going into right now. In 1984, the Israeli government gave us permission to come live here. We were allowed, in the end, to have here 7 of what we call in Hebrew karavanim, these mobile homes. There were 5 down here, and there were another 2 up by the road. In 1998, the end of 1998, there was a terrorist attack here. An Arab got in through the back window of one of the homes over here and murdered Rabbi Shlomo Ra'anan, who was the grandson of the first chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Cook. He was 63 years old at the time. Following that murder, the then Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, promised us we'd be able to build and get out of these. But we knew that this is Tel Hebron. You dig, you can't dig. After you've built a building underground, then whatever's underneath is gone. We brought in the Israeli Archaeological Authority. They dug, they found what they found here. And only after that, working together with the archaeologists to put together the plans, we were able to build a building above us, which is today called Beit Menachem, the Menachem building. And of course, this was done with the archaeologists, so we wouldn't damage anything. As a matter of fact, they actually favor this because this stuff has been covered for so many thousands of years, being exposed to the elements. At least it has some kind of protection on it.
And Beit Menachem is what?
It's for the most part, it's residential. There's also a small Torah study hall in the rabbi's memory. Rabbi Ra'anan's daughter and son-in-law came to live here. And he is a Torah scholar. He became the head of this. We were men studying to be rabbis here. They can study here for 5 years to receive their degrees, and then they can go out and teach and whatever. We started down where Abraham was. So now we move up to King David. The site that we're standing at right now is called the Tomb of Jesse and Ruth. The tomb of Jesse, Shai, King David's father, Ruth, his great-grandmother. Down in those excavations, we didn't see anything, almost, from 3,000 years ago. 3,000 years ago is when David lived here. Why not? Because the archaeologists tell us that David probably built the original city of David on the highest point in Tel Hebron, which is up here. And they really believe that if they dug around here, under our feet, they would find not only the first city of David, but they'd find his palace. That's someplace here under our feet. The building here, called the Tomb of Jesse and Ruth, the origins of this building probably go back about, I don't know, 1,000, 1,500 years, something like that. Today we have here a synagogue and a study hall, and of course the caves are probably someplace all the way underneath. It's a very, very, very ancient area. There's something of a cave structure over there, which is about 1,500 years old. It's very, very special. You think about David and this is the beginning of the Davidic monarchy. This is it. If the roots of Abraham are there, this is the roots of David. We say David Melech Yisrael Chai v'Kayam. King David is alive. I mean, this is it. This is where it starts. You know, it blows you away. But this is here. And now, you know, people always ask me how we know this is it. I mean, a long time ago. And the truth is that we don't know. We do have written records going back 700, 800 years of people that used to come pray here at the Tomb of Jesse. We think there's a reasonable chance it is. The tradition of Ruth is a little bit newer. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But on the holiday of Shavuos, hundreds of people come up here because on that holiday we read the scroll of Ruth in its entirety. Right. People come up here to hear the scroll of Ruth being read at the Tomb of Jesse and Ruth. It's an amazing, amazing time.
And again, just so people understand, Jesse was David's father.
And Ruth was his great-grandmother.
And Ruth was the famous woman from the Ketuvim who was supposed to be ultimately the ultimate descendant, but yet also the progenitor of the Messiah.
That's correct.
And so, in essence, this structure is a tomb in their honor, and for all we know, Jesse and maybe even Ruth are buried here.
This is what the tradition has. Yes.
Very lovely.
It's a very, very interesting place, and you know what? Very quickly, as long as we're here, come on for a second. Now, you have to keep in mind that's probably about 1,500 years old. If you turn around and look at what I'm looking at right now, you can see there are rooms here. Now, this is Byzantine. Byzantine, you're talking about 1,500 years ago. You see the size of the stones. There's ornamentation above some of the stones. This is very, very old. That room that we went through is probably also at least 1,500 years old. It's pretty good shape for 1,500 years, you know. Again, when you realize where you are, where you're standing, what's underneath your feet, there's a well over here that we keep covered up, which is also ancient.
Here's the well.
You have a well here, and right behind where you're standing, Mark, is the original part of the original wall from this structure. You're talking about a wall that's 1,500 years old. This is part of probably some kind of a crusader structure that was built here. It had to be a reason why they built it here. In other words, first of all, it was isolated, and they looked for isolated places. But why here? It's very high up, and because this is considered to be David. You know, it's so. One of these days, we're going to keep digging here.
And maybe you'll find something more.
The archaeologists, hopefully, we're going to begin at some point fairly soon more archaeological work here, and who knows? Next time you come over here, I'll be able to show you the palace. Come, let me show you some other things. In this neighborhood, there are today 18 families. There are 18 families in this neighborhood. We have families in this home's moment we're renovating these. These things have been here for quite a long time. They're falling apart.
Down.
So we renovated theirs and another one, and we're working now on the third one. It's very expensive, but you know, his wife said to a group of people last, I guess it was Sukkot, we had people here. She said during the winter I have to walk around with an umbrella inside because it, you know, rains inside. So we're renovating these things. What we really want to do is get these out, continue digging, and then build stage 2 of this going around, and hopefully the day will come when we'll actually be able to do that.
How many families are here?
In this neighborhood there are 18. In all of Hebron today there are about 90 Jewish families. Here in this neighborhood there are about 18 families. There are in Hebron over 300 children. There's a yeshiva here with 350 guys. Altogether in the city, about 850 Jews. In the community of Kiryat Arba that you came through coming down here, there are about 1,500 families, about 7,500 people.
Okay, and when people from America, whether it's a CNN news agency, New York Times, or just Jews, say to you, why do you have to be in Hebron? It's an Arab city, it's a Palestinian city, you're poking your finger in their eye, there's only 18 families here, do you really have to be here? Isn't it in some way exacerbating an Israeli-Palestinian conflict? You say?
Well, look, first of all, Mark, that's a question that you can't answer on one leg, and if you want to, I'll be very happy to go into a little bit more detail a little bit later. But the first thing that I have to say here is if we talk about the roots of the Jewish people, so what happens if you take a tree and you cut off the roots? What happens to the tree? Now, it's not just a statement that you throw around, some kind of demagoguery that, historically, we lost Hebron in 1929.
Yes.
People came back, were here until 1936. In 36, the British threw them out. That was the end of a community until we came back. In 1948, we lost Jerusalem. We came back to Jerusalem in June of 1967. The next day, we came back to Hebron. It was day after day. On Kafchet Iyar, we came back to Yerushalayim. Kaftet Iyar, we came back here. In 1998, Hebron was split. In in 1997, June of 1997, Hebron was split. Most of the city was transferred to Arafat and the Palestinian Authority. What was the next thing that they started talking about with all of these peace talks, so to speak? Jerusalem. They go together. You play with Hebron, you're playing with Jerusalem. You play with Jerusalem, you're playing with our heart. Maybe Hebron is the soul, but they go together. You can't. If this isn't a Jewish city, what is? I once counted, if you go into weather.com and you want to see where the weather is someplace in the world, you put up the word and you get a list. So I put in Hebron, and I got, 12 or 13 Hebrons in North America, in the United States. If I went to Hebron, Pennsylvania, and I said, I want to go buy a house there, and somebody said, well, you can't, you're a Jew. It would make headlines of racism and biases and discrimination. The only Hebron in the world where they say, I can't buy a house because I'm a Jew and it's perfectly okay is the first one. Doesn't make any sense. Why is it a provocation for a Jew to live in the first Jewish city in Israel?
And from your perspective, if there were an Arab population which said to you, welcome, you're welcome to live here. By the way, this is going to be at the moment, in terms of the population, it's overwhelmingly Arab. It's an Arab city, but you're welcome to live here. Would that be satisfactory to you?
Look, going back almost 20 years now, basically that's what Israel tried to do. Israel tried to create a situation together with Yasser Arafat in the United States whereby we were going to somehow live together. Almost all of Hebron was given to Arafat. The area where we live today, he agreed that we would stay here. He signed an agreement saying that basically recognize our legitimacy here. All of the heavy populated Arab cities throughout Judea and Samaria were turned over to the Palestinian Authority. Since then, there have only been about 2,000 Jews killed in terrorist attacks. Most of those terrorist attacks perpetrated by people from those cities. Buses blown up, stabbings, shootings, whatever. I find it very difficult, and there are times with groups I'm very cynical. I cannot accept situations, hypothetical, where, well, if they, because it doesn't work. Israel has tried so many times, and of course we oppose these, but it doesn't make any difference if we oppose them or not. We have to look at the results, what has happened since then. If since 1993, 1994, the beginning of Oslo with Rabin and Peres, everything had been totally peaceful. I might still believe what I believe today, ideologically, religiously, but you would say to me, but it works. But it hasn't worked. So why, play games? Well, what if? And, we've lost too many people to play games like that.
Okay. And one more question. Again, you'll decide whether you want to answer it now or later. Every now and then we will hear people in the American Jewish community say, the Jews, the Israelis, I should say, the Israelis in some way humiliate the Arab-Palestinian population of Hebron. And there's a street where they're not allowed to walk on, and this is their city, and yet the Israeli army controls it, and that in some way it is a symptom of an oppressive Israeli regime, and that this is why so much of the Western world, and even within the United States, there's a portion of the Jewish community which is critical of Israel. Why? Because of what is supposed to be happening here. And you would say what?
That's an excellent question. And if you'll hold off for about 3 or 4 minutes, I'll answer that question, not only just talking it, but being able to show you. Okay, look, you asked me a very pertinent question about how the Jews living here perhaps are a bone in the throats of the Arabs. So first of all, just on a general scale, today Israel has 6 million Jews living in it. We're surrounded by 22 Arab states with about 750 million Arabs, and they don't want us in Israel any more than the Arabs in Hebron want us here. But I think statistically, we're better here than when we take it all together against half a billion or 750 million people. Okay, so if you say I can't be here because there are more Arabs than Jews, you can say the same thing about the state of Israel. We shouldn't be in Israel. If there was no state of Israel, everybody knows the world would be perfect. Iran wouldn't be building a nuclear bomb, and everybody would just be in love with Obama. But let's take Hebron for a minute. I brought you up here so that you would be able to overlook the city a little bit. This is Hebron. Okay, you see that big building with the dome there, Mark? See, there's a big building right in front of us with a dome, a silver dome. That's a shopping center. Okay, I haven't been able to go in there, but from photos that I've seen and what I've heard about, it's about as sophisticated a shopping center as you're going to find in Fort Lee or Stamford, Connecticut. Just so that people should understand, in Hebron today, there are 17,000 factories. 17,000 factories. 1/3 of the Palestinian Authority GNP comes out of Hebron. They produce here many of the items that normal Israelis purchase every day. Some of the high-name mattresses, shoes, sandals, pottery, anything. It's all made here. Okay, now, so this is the paralyzed city because of a few hundred families, a few hundred people. It's a normal city. There are schools here, there are hospitals here, there are universities here. Whatever you could possibly want, you have right here in front of us. Now, just so that we should understand and get our facts really straight, I will show you pictures in a little while at our next stop. But when we came back here in 1967, the hills that you see here, just about everything that's here wasn't here. The hills were empty. There was nothing here.
How many years ago?
1967. What was 1967 today?
This has all been built since 67?
This is all since 67. Now, if you take a look where I'm pointing, you see some old brownstone buildings. When you go up a little bit, those brownstones go up a little bit, and then you cut east, you go right, and they go all the way down. You don't see all of them down here. It goes down past the Tomb of the Patriarchs and then down a little bit. When we came back in 1967, that's what was here.
Just that?
That was what was here. There was a sporadic something somewhere, but that was what was here. That was Hebron over here. Okay? If we turn around and you take a look up in this direction, okay, and you see all the buildings up on the hills and everything else, we come back in 1967, I'll show you a photograph of what these hills looked like in 1972, 1973. There was nothing here. Why does this look like the way it looks today? Because my neighbors here didn't need building permits. They could build this before this was in the hands of the Palestinian Authority. They could do whatever they wanted to do, and we couldn't. We needed building permits. Building permits we need from the defense minister and the prime minister. They have to sign them. They didn't sign them for political reasons. We look the way we do, and they look the way they do. Hebron is the most economically developed city in all of Judea and Samaria, what other people call the West Bank. Today in Hebron, there's one stretch of street for about a kilometer and a half, where the Arabs aren't allowed to go down the street. That was closed by the IDF for security reasons, and I'll show you later why. Okay? That's the only place in Hebron they can't go. I, as a Jew today in Hebron, have access to 3% of the city. In other words, I can't go over here. When we go down the road in a little while, you'll see a checkpoint. The Arabs are allowed to come over here, and they're allowed to go back over there. I can't go over there, but they can come over here. I have access to 3% of the city. They have access to 97% of the city. So there are a lot of people that say that there's apartheid in Hebron, and they're correct, but it's against me. It's not against them. This is Hebron. Now, when the left speaks about Hebron, they never come and show you this. This doesn't exist, okay? And I unfortunately can't take you over here. If I could take you on a tour over here, I'd take you to some very interesting Jewish sites. Right down below us here is the tomb of Othniel ben Kenaz. Othniel ben Kenaz was the first judge in Israel. He was Caleb ben Yefuneh's half-brother. I can't take you there today. There are other places I can't take you to. So that when people say that my presence in Hebron is paralyzing them, and because of me, they can't do anything, it's total, complete nonsense. There's no truth to that whatsoever.
And what about the word humiliation? Are you humiliating them in some way?
No, they're humiliating us. And the truth is, it's not just that they're humiliating us, it's the Israeli policies here, which sometimes tie the hands of the army and don't let them deal with what they have to deal with to see to we're safe. Humiliation is a very mild word, because what's happening with us is that our lives are being put in jeopardy because of inaction, because of Israeli policies. Today we're finding a tremendous rise in violence. There's a huge amount of rocks being thrown at us. They're starting to shoot again. There have been several shooting incidents, including shootings not far from here. We're very, very concerned about that. We've seen that happen in the past. When the violence isn't stopped immediately, then it escalates, and sometimes they can lose total control of it. You know, when you talk about the Israeli security as humiliation, we have to keep in mind, you know, I told you I've been in Israel for almost 40 years. I came here in 1974 in university. In those days in Jerusalem, when you got on a bus, they didn't have somebody at the bus stops checking to make sure that you're not getting on the bus with a bomb. Today you have that. Is that humiliation, or is that a necessity for Israeli security? If you go up north today, in the area of the Galil, and keep going up north, you find huge amounts of military presence, because that's necessary for the security of the state. And the same thing is true here. I would be very happy to live here without a military presence. However, unfortunately, without that military presence today, without security, we know exactly what would happen.
And would you be willing to live here as a Jew and also live with Arab Palestinians here as well in the ancient capital of Hebron?
First of all, we do live together with them.
Yes,
listen.
The question really is, do you have an ulterior motive? Is there an agenda here among the Jews who would come into this Arab city and insist on being here, that your real goal is that one day this is all Jewish and not Arab?
My agenda is to live here. Of course I want to have more Jews here. People come to us and they say, how can you justify being here? There are only X. There are less than 1,000 Jews in Hebron. So on the one hand, they say to me, well, you know, you really shouldn't be here because there aren't enough people. And when I say that I want to bring more people here, they say, oh, so you want to throw everybody out? You know, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Of course we want more people here. We want Hebron to be an open city. Today, you know, if Muhammad across the street decides that he's willing to sell me his house, and I'll pay a lot of money for his house, if they catch him, they'll kill him. It's a capital crime by the Palestinian Authority to sell property to a Jew. So I can't buy anything from him unless, after I do it, I gave him a suitcase with money and send him on an airplane to JFK and you host him. Okay? Because if he stays here and they catch him, they kill him. They arrest him, they torture him, they kill him, and they do it. Okay? There are Arabs in prison today because they've sold property to Jews, and some of them have death sentences over their heads. Of course we want more Jews here. Does that mean that everybody here has to leave? Of course not. I've been working as a spokesperson for the community here for 17, 18 years. I have never ever said that for us to live here they have to leave. As a matter of fact, I think that one of the solutions today, okay, I'm willing to live with anybody, okay, if they are willing to accept the same obligations of any Israeli citizen, okay, and they're willing to live within the framework of the State of Israel, and if they're willing to stop trying to kill Jews, so I give them Israeli ID cards, and they have the same rights and obligations that I have.
And what if it was the reverse? What if there was some miracle here and there was a peace settlement between, quote, Palestinians and Israelis, and there was a new Palestinian state created on the West Bank, and this was part of Palestine, but they said to you, David, you and any other Jews who want to live under a Palestinian flag, you're welcome to live in Hebron, but you either have an Israeli passport and you're living here as basically a ger toshav in reverse, and you'll vote in Israeli elections but not here, or if you want a Palestinian passport, you want to become a Palestinian citizen, you can vote in our elections too. If they allowed you to stay here, but it was under Palestinian sovereignty, would that be an acceptable alternative to you?
Look, I personally left the United States to come live in the state of Israel. I came to live with Jews. I might not necessarily like the people who are running the state. I might have a lot of problems with them, okay, but they're not doing what they're doing to me because I'm a Jew. Well, maybe they are, but it's very different from the situation that Jews lived in 100 years ago, or today even in some places in the world. If I wanted to live under a foreign rule, then I could go back to the United States, or I could go live in Sweden, or wherever I want. I want to live in Israel, and I want to live together with other Israelis, most of whom are Jews, under Israeli rule. I didn't come here to live under the rule of these people. Besides which, again, people, a lot of times people ask me similar questions. They ask me these hypothetical questions, and I get very cynical. And I say to them, you'll never guess. This morning I woke up and I opened the window, you'll never guess what I saw outside. I saw a pink elephant flying through the sky. It was really beautiful. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. We've went through it. We've seen it. The Jews and the Arabs lived together here peacefully, sort of semi-peacefully. Okay, in the 1920s, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, and I'll show you what happened here. The Jews and the Arabs lived together as neighbors, and that resulted in a massacre whereby 67 Jews were murdered, women were raped, men were tortured, and the community was decimated by their next-door neighbors, by their friends. We have not seen any of that change today. I had here last week some Danish journalists, and I showed them the photographs of 1929, and they said to me, that's what was. That's not today. And I said to them, have you gone to Itamar? Did you go to the Fogel family house? They didn't know what I was talking about. What happened to the Fogel family less than 2 years ago is what happened here in Hebron in 1929. They chopped them apart. They butchered them. Okay? Again, you have to, words are words. Words are not deeds. You have to have some kind of proof that something is real, that it's not just something on a piece of paper which isn't worth what the paper that it's written on is. Okay? Again, Israel has made major attempts to try to bring about a situation where there would be. Ehud Barak offered Arafat 95% of Judea and Samaria, including Hebron, including East Jerusalem. Arafat said no and started a war that left 1,500 Jews dead. Ehud Olmert offered him 96%. The map was printed in the Jerusalem Post 2 weeks ago on Friday. And Abu Mazen said no. There are reasons why they're saying no, and I'll be very happy to detail from him. Maybe in a little while we'll sit down and I'll tell you why. It's not going to happen.
Okay. One more question. And again, I could have asked this at any point. And again, I want you to understand that, and our audience knows me well, I am enormously sympathetic to everything you're saying. At the same time, I want to ask every question I think any Jew might want.
No problem at all.
So David, on your right hip is a gun.
That's correct.
Show the gun. Okay. You carry a pistol on your right hip. You're a Jew who has to carry a gun. By the way, David, have you ever pulled that gun?
Only to crazy people who offend me when they ask me stupid questions. No, I've never used it.
Okay, and you've never fired the gun?
Only target practice.
Okay, so you carry it more as a symbol, as sort of also a warning?
No, it's not a symbol and it's not a warning. A gun is a tool of destruction. I know people that are alive because they had a weapon, and I know people that are dead because they didn't have a weapon.
So you carry it just in case?
It's a tool of self-defense. People are licensed here by the Ministry of the Interior for reasons of self-defense. That self-defense can be that somebody tries to attack me or anybody that I'm with, or I can be walking down the street and see something happen and try to do something to alleviate continued massacre.
But this is the question. Answer it the best you can. Somebody might say to you, oh, David, do you really want to live in a place where you have to carry a gun on your hip?
Listen, Mark, when I came to Israel in 1974, it's very difficult for people to pick up because you deal with different cultures, and I meet people, but I remember where I came from. 1974, I'm in Jerusalem. I was 20 years old, and I'm wandering around the center of the city, and I see guys that are younger than me carrying automatic submachine guns, Uzis, these little, it's a machine gun. Now, where does a kid growing up in New Jersey see somebody walking around with a gun? They're either cops and robbers on television or policemen. That's where you see guns. This is a guy who's younger than me with a machine gun. It took me a long time to get used to it. When you live here for a period of time, you realize it's not Hebron. I was told a couple of weeks ago, statistically, a third of the Israeli population is armed. In other words, it's not just people that live in Hebron, it's people who live in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem, because today that's the security necessity. You can ask me a question that's much more disturbing than, do I want to live in a place where I have to carry a gun? You can say to me, do you really want to live in a place where you have to go into the army, where your kids have to go into the army? You know what happens? Kids that go into the army, God forbid there's a war. Some of those kids don't come home. But if this is our land, and I'm talking about the state of Israel, if this is our land and we want to live here, and there are people that want to take it away from us, so what do? Where did the United States go fight? Are the terrorists in Afghanistan trying to take away Texas? Are they bombing California? The truth is they are, okay? Some of them work to knock down the World Trade Center. We've just heard that they wanted to hit the subways, Wall Street, the Pentagon, the White House, the Capitol. You do what you have to do in order to preserve, to exist, to make sure that your people are safe. That's the first obligation of any government, to make sure the people are safe. If today, I would be very happy to wander around without a gun. You know, when we came back to Hebron in 1967, Jews wandered around the entire city without being armed. Today, unfortunately, the security situation is such that people around the country need to be able to protect themselves, whether it be having a security force, the army, the border police, or people who carry weapons. We are at the ancient Jewish cemetery. The ancient Jewish cemetery is very interesting. There are a number of plots. There's a plot down below us, and if you're interested, we'll go down there in a minute just to take a quick little look around where the rabbis are buried. There are what's called the rabbinic plot. There are some very, very famous, important people down there. The plot over here where we are standing, over here is where if people pass away in Hebron Kiryat Arba, they can still be buried here today. The plot over here is where people in 1929 were buried.
Can we see that?
Yeah, let's go up here for a minute. You've asked me indirectly, you know, the relationship between Jews and Arabs. Jews and Arabs lived together in Hebron literally for hundreds of years. From the middle of the 1500s to the early 1900s, this is all under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. The Turks were here. People that ruled on the ground, local Arabs, sheikhs, muftis, whomever, their relationships with the Jews fluctuated. Sometimes it was not so great, and sometimes it was a little worse than that, and sometimes a little worse than that. That's the way they lived. They didn't have any choice. Coming into the 1900s, by eyewitness accounts that we have, the Jews and the Arabs lived together fairly well. They lived like neighbors. There were Jews who spoke Arabic, Arabs who spoke Yiddish, Ladino. That started to change in the 1920s. In the 1920s, the British came over here under the mandate of the League of Nations to form a national home for the Jewish people in the land of Israel. Now, of course, we all know that that national home included what is today southern Lebanon, what's today Syria, what is today Jordan. It didn't exist then, coming all the way around, of course, here. The British changed that mandate. They chopped it apart. They left us with a little bit. One of the signs of the change in British policy was the appointment of Hajj Amin al-Husseini as the Mufti of Jerusalem. Hajj Amin al-Husseini was a Jew hater. He was a Nazi, met with Hitler in Berlin. I just finished a book about his relationship with Nazi Germany. He had plans to kill the Jews living in Israel, and they expected Rommel to invade during World War II. He hated the Jews. He incited. The incitement peaked in the summer of 1929. They were trying to prevent Jews from getting to the Kotel, the Western Wall in Jerusalem. Same issues we have today, we had then too. On Thursday, August 22nd, 1929, a group of Jews come from Yerushalayim into Hebron. They belong to the Haganah, the Jewish Defense Organization. They bring weapons with them. They meet with the Jewish leadership in Hebron. They say the Mufti's inciting, there's going to be trouble, take these weapons so you can protect yourselves. Carry a gun. And they said, no, we don't want to carry guns. What, we'll look like extremists. It's a provocation. That's what they said to them. They said, the Arabs have protected us before. They'll protect us again. We've already spoke to them. Weapons will only act as a provocation. They sent them back to Yerushalayim that same day with the weapons they brought in. The next day, on Friday, the Mufti sent messengers all over Israel saying that the Jews were trying to conquer Temple Mount. Arab blood was flowing through the streets of Jerusalem. This was, of course, a lie, but it was a signal. Rioting commenced. Those rumors hit Hebron in the afternoon. The Arabs here too started rioting. One of their first stops was the Hebron yeshiva that had come up from Slobodka in 1924. There was one man sitting in the study hall. It was late Friday afternoon, and they murdered him. He's buried right back here. Following that murder, the Jews in Hebron went hysterical. They ran to the British officer who was here. His name was Kafarata. They said to him, they were hysterical. And he said, just go home and lock your doors. That's what they did. They had no choice. The next day, the Arabs went house to house and slaughtered these people. There was virtually no defense whatsoever. Most of his police force were primarily Arabs. They participated. Over a period of about 3 hours, 67 Jews were murdered, 70 were wounded. There were Arabs that saved Jews. There weren't enough. 67 people were slaughtered. 3 days later, the survivors were expelled. The British threw them out. I knew a man, probably is no longer alive, whose family had been saved by an Arab. He told me that his father wrote to the British High Commissioner and asked why the victims were punished. Why did they expel the Jews after the murder? And the answer he received was, well, there were more of them than there were of you. You couldn't keep living together. It was easier to throw you out than to throw them out. Thanks a lot. A small group came back in 1931. They were here in very difficult conditions until 1936. One night in April of 36, the British went house to house saying, the Arabs are inciting again. We can't protect you. They threw them out as is in the middle of the night, and that was the end of a community until we came back 1967. June 1967, we come back here. Where we're standing right now was a vegetable patch and a shack. The entire cemetery had been totally destroyed. There was nothing here. Eventually, we were able to rebuild the cemetery. We used aerial photographs from World War II, which showed when the cemetery was still here. People were able to measure, they were able to dig and find the foundations for the original graves, and the cemetery was restored as it had been prior to its destruction. 59 of the 67 Jews were killed, died in Hebron, were buried here, and we know exactly where they're all buried, and with very few exceptions, all of the people that are here were those who were massacred in 1929. In the New York, New Jersey area, there's a fairly well-known Jewish radio broadcaster named Nachum Segal.
Yes, he's in New York.
Okay, so Nachum Segal was here with me once, and he pointed out the grave right here of Shmuel Halevi Rosenholz, who was the first Jew killed on Friday afternoon. And he said to me, Nachum said, my father studied here in Hebron with him.
Amazing.
You know?
Obviously, the 29 riots that led to these deaths are a turning point in early pre-state history. It was a very, very, very tragic period. And it sounds, even as you describe it, it was unnecessary, David. It didn't have to happen if there was a different attitude, and as you point out, and we do this in my chavra all the time, on Yom Ha'atzmaut, we read some of the early writings where Jews and Arabs, they were not called Palestinians then, Jews and Arabs, lived together wonderfully and shared simchas together and would be at each other's weddings and would share food, and you had a sense at that point, and there were some British writings, by the way, that described how the Jewish presence in pre-state Palestine saved the lives of Arab children because they raised the standard of health care in the country.
The same thing is true today.
Yeah, that's
listen,
true. That's
right. I
right.
have to tell you something, because the point that you make is so essential, and exactly what you're talking about is happening today. A friend of mine, who's going to be in Israel in a couple of days, was here last year on a seminar, and at some point during the seminar in Jerusalem, they went to an Anglican church in East Jerusalem. The pastor there calls himself a Palestinian Christian. And he spoke about the Palestinian cause and whatever they spoke about. And then he took questions. And my friend said to him, okay, there's a Palestinian state. You're going to go live there? He said, hell no. I'm staying here. Well, because, and there are a lot of people that think that way. They won't say it publicly because they're afraid to say it because they'll get killed. But what Israel has been able to give these people is above and beyond what they could ever dreamt of. But we still find the hatred, and we find the animosities, and we find the violence and the terror. But look, this is, you know, we try not to live in the past. But you have to know what your past is in order to know where you're going, and know what your future is. And this is very much a part of our past, unfortunately.
It's also so ironic to me in some way that this cemetery, which is symbolic of what could have been and was basically forbidden to be, overlooks this modern, contemporary Arab city of Hebron. And wouldn't it have been wonderful if we all could have created this together?
From your mouth to God's ears. This is a monument for Torah scrolls that were destroyed. There was a little pogrom in the tomb of the Patriarchs back in 1976 on the eve of Yom Kippur. Actually, it was 1975, 76. The Torah scrolls that were destroyed were buried here. This has been desecrated numerous times. There's nothing left in there, but this is a memorial for them. There are many people here that shouldn't be here. Okay, for example, the grave back here is of Shalhevet Pas. She's a 10-month-old baby that was shot and killed by a sniper in Hebron. During the Second Intifada, the beginning of 2001, Bet Nisan, she was shot and killed down in the Avram Avinu neighborhood. There are also many others here who were killed in terrorist attacks at one time or another over the years. There's a very interesting story here. You know, years ago, how did people raise money? They'd go all around the world and they'd sell a plot in the cemetery. There was somebody back in the 30s that bought a certificate that he has a plot in Hebron. In the 1960s, he made Aliyah. He's from Morocco. He came to live in Israel. In the 60s, this was still under the rule of the Jordanians. After it was liberated, in the early 1970s, he went to the Religious Council building and he said, I have a certificate, I have a plot in Hebron. When I die, I want you to bury me here. The man lived to be about 107. When he finally died, they buried him here. Say it's you know, people want a schooler for a long life, you know. But so let's. And
incidentally, the homes we see right here.
They're all Arab. This is all Arab. This is all Arab.
Right surrounding this cemetery.
That's correct.
Here we get Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah, well, this is a family that came over here. There's a family that came over here, and they lived in Kiryat Arba. I knew her. I didn't know her husband, but I knew her. And she was, everybody knew her in Kiryat Arba. Look, first of all, just to get our bearings, this is called Beit Hadassah. Beit Hadassah was built in 1893 as a medical clinic for Jews and Arabs in Hebron. The word Hadassah rings a bell because it was run by the Hadassah Women's Organization. It was one of the first clinics, first 5 clinics in Israel that they opened up for medical care. And of course, that later developed into what we today know as the hospital. Hadassah Medical Organization, the 2 hospitals in Jerusalem, and like that. I live here. I live upstairs there. I've got a married daughter that lives upstairs here also. If we have time, we'll run in for a minute. But before that, okay, there's a tremendous amount of controversy in Hebron concerning the street right here in front of us.
Are we talking about the street up here?
Look, first of all, understand that Jewish Hebron is from where we were in Tel Romeda, down this road for another 1.5 kilometers to the Mount Machpelah.
Down this road?
That's what we have access to. That's Hebron. Okay, I showed you earlier all of Hebron, what the Arabs have. What we have access to is from up in Tel Romeda down here to the tomb of the Patriarchs. It's about 2 kilometers. This is under Jewish military control. Hebron was broken into H1 and H2. H1 was given to the Arabs. H2 is the area where we are. It was left under Israeli security control. Now, during the Second Intifada, I'm talking about 2001, there was a suicide bomber who blew himself up and killed some people down the road. There were shootings, there were stabbings, there were acid attacks. At that time, the Israeli army closed this road to Arab traffic, to Arab vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic. It had been open. When I moved down to this building 15 years ago, this road was open. Taxis went down this road. In order to get a license from the PA to have a taxi, they had to agree to come down this road any number of times so as to cause also traffic jams and like that. It was open to Arab pedestrians, to city vehicles, and to taxis, to public vehicles. Because of the war that was going on here, people that were injured and people that were killed, the Israeli military decided to close the road. It was a security threat. They closed the stores on the road. There were security threats. This has gone through the Israeli Supreme Court twice. The Israeli Supreme Court, for people that are not aware, is extremely left-wing, very, very left-wing. They don't like ruling in favor of people like us. They upheld the military decision to keep this closed twice. The president of the Supreme Court then, Dorit Beinish, said that this is a minimum necessary for security in Hebron. Okay, now understand that security in Hebron is not just me. Security in Hebron is also you. And when I say you, I'm talking about close to 1 million people that are here every year. We want people to be safe when they're in Hebron. People from all over the world, all different religions. The military also has other jobs in Hebron. One of their primary tasks for the military in Hebron is to patrol on the other side of the city and manage to weed out the terrorists before they get to Tel Aviv and blow themselves up in buses. And because we are in Hebron and we're in the other cities, we've gone back to them, this is what's today preventing the terrorism. It's not the Arabs don't have any desire to kill people, but the security today is very, very good. There's a lot of help from above also, but the security is very, very heavy, very tight, and that's what prevents the terrorists from planning attacks in a place like Hebron, or in Jenin, or in Tulkarem, and running around and blowing themselves up in Beersheba, or in Haifa, or in Tel Aviv. Now this street, again, the only place in Hebron that the Arabs don't have access is down the street. Otherwise, they have the entire city. An Arab today that wants to get down the street, they can walk down the street to the stairs. They can go up the stairs, and they go down, and then they can come back down around in about 1 kilometer. In other words, they can't walk down the street. And the only reason, and you know, it's very, very important. People don't pick this up, but the reason this is closed is because they started a war with us. If that hadn't happened, then it would probably still be open today. Now, it's very important to, you know, when somebody starts a war, I guess they think they're going to win. But they also have to understand there's a price to pay. They started a war with us, and they lost. There's no reason why I have to sacrifice my security, or your security, or my grandchildren's security here, because they say we don't like it. I don't like it either. I don't have access to most of the city. I can't go on the other side. When I drive from here to places up north, I used to be able to go through Ramallah. I used to drive through Ramallah. I can't do that anymore. If I want to get to Beit El, or I want to get to the area in Binyamin or the Shomron, I have to go all the way around. It takes me an extra 45 minutes to go around, when it used to take me 15 minutes. It's very unpleasant, you know, but today we know what happens to Jews that go into Ramallah today. We've seen it, unfortunately. So it's true that this causes some, it's an uncomfortable situation, but they brought it upon themselves. And the Israeli Supreme Court has upheld that. The Israeli military has upheld that. I didn't do it, they did it. If this is what's necessary for security, then this is what has to be done.
And are you saying to me that the only street in Hebron which is restricted in any way to Arabs is this street?
That's correct. That's correct.
So when I was told that there was a street in which the Jews have to walk on the right and the Arabs have to walk on the left.
Okay. Down by Machpelah, we're going to go down there in a couple of minutes, there was an area that the army put up a barrier.
Yes.
Because of security. A few months ago that was taken down. And the barrier today isn't there anymore, and
you'll show us where it was.
Yeah. This is the end of what we call King David Street. The Arabs call it Shuhada. Shuhada, by the way, means martyr, the Street of the Martyrs. Okay? This cement wall that we see here on the right side used to extend down towards the little soldiers' booth down there where all the kids are walking. That was to prevent clashes between Jews and Arabs here in, this was removed a number of months ago. And thank God, since it's been removed, we haven't had any problems. The street is no longer divided. The Arabs walk down here, we walk down here, and things are fairly peaceful.
And when the cement wall was extended, which side was the Jews? Were the Jews on? Which side were the Arabs on?
The Arabs came down from here.
On the right.
To our right over here is the entrance today where the Arabs go into Machpelah. The building is divided. We have an entrance that's open for anybody that's not Jewish, and there's an entrance for anybody who's a Muslim. The Arabs would come down the street here, they would come down here on the right side, and then they could cross the street over there.
And was there real enmity between Jew and Arab along this street at one point in time?
Well, there have been terrorist attacks here where Jews have been attacked. There were two men.
There are films made in America, David, which show all kinds of Jews just screaming and yelling and taking packages away from Palestinian women, trying to take their groceries home. What's that all about?
Look, I'm not sure about taking groceries away from anybody. You work with film. So do I. And there's this newfangled thing called cutting. You can just delete something, which means that I can show something on film, but nobody sees what happened before it. They don't know what brought it on. And that's what happens many times with the videos that you see. The Israeli children here aren't bashful. We try to teach them here not to initiate violent attacks. But if anybody is attacked, then they don't just turn the other cheek. They don't turn around and walk away. The kids here actually are very honest, and they don't want anything that doesn't belong to them. So if somebody gives them something and it doesn't belong to them, they give it back. And many times that's what you see on a video. The other point that has to be kept in mind is that, I grew up in New Jersey. And when I was a kid, we used to throw rocks at each other too. Our parents used to get very upset with us. It never made YouTube. Okay, when it happens in Hebron, it makes YouTube.
It's both between Jew and Arab.
Look, there's no love lost here. There was a war here. Most of the people in the city either have friends or relatives who were either injured or killed during the Intifada here. And I didn't have time to take you into my home. Next time I'll show you the results of some of that in my house. But there's no love lost. It's very unfortunate, and I really do hope that the day will come when that will change. But today there's no love lost, and we just try to keep that, on a low burner. We're not interested in terror. We're not interested in attacks by Jews or by Arabs. And that's the way we try to educate the kids. We're standing outside the tomb of the Patriarchs. This is the center of anything. Across the street, we see here what's called in Hebrew balagan. Balagan, mass confusion. We're going to have 2,500 people here tonight. We're having an outdoor concert. You can see the stage here. We're bringing a very popular Israeli singer, a very young guy.
Who?
His name is Benayoun, Amir Benayoun, and he's going to stand up here tonight and sing for a couple of hours. And this is the first time we're having an event like this. You can have 2,500 people from all over the country. People probably have never coming to Hebron for a concert outside here.
Amazing! Isn't that amazing?
We'll see it tonight. It's going to be. They don't have enough tickets. We could probably sell another 2,500 tickets, but that's why we had to park down there. They're not letting the cars run through here.
And do I assume, quite honestly, that it will be virtually an Israeli Jewish audience?
Yes, sir, it will be. That's the kind of singer it is. And, the Arabs go hear the Arab singers, and we go, people enjoy it. I mean, this isn't for everybody, but people enjoy it. But this is right outside the tomb of the Patriarchs, which is right here, right around us.
We are standing right here.
By the tomb of the Patriarchs. Okay, look, a little bit about the place. We know 100% that this is the site we read about in the Bible where Abraham bought a cave and a field to bury his wife Sarah. And as we talked about before, how do you know? I'm talking about 4,000 years ago almost. First of all, this building behind us, this huge monument, was built by Herod the Great 2,000 years ago. It's probably the only 2,000-year-old building in the world that still exists in its entirety. It's still used, probably for the same purposes for which it was built. It's a place of worship and a place of identity. It's true that Herod lived some 1,700 years after Abraham. But if he built this kind of a building here that's been here for 2,000 years, it's not bad, 2,000-year-old building. He must have had a good reason for it. There were also excavations done over here where they found burial caves from the Canaanite era. It's the days of Abraham. And the other reason we know is because people have been inside those caves. People have actually been able to access these caves. We have photographs taken down underneath. There's a whole underground cavern. There's a pathway. And we have pictures inside the caves themselves. So we know 100% that that's where we are. Now, you asked me before, why we live here and isn't this a provocation? You have to keep in mind that this site, which we call the second holiest site to the Jewish people in all the world, was off limits to Jews and to Christians for 700 years. In 1260, the Mamelukes, who were actually liberated Muslim slaves, they expelled the Crusaders who'd been here since 1100 till 1260. 1267, their emperor, a guy named Baibars, declared this to be off limits. He said, this is a mosque. Did the same thing on Temple Mount in Jerusalem. This is a mosque. Only Muslims can pray here, and that's the way it was for 700 years. There used to be stairs going up the eastern wall, Jews that came to pray here. You said that you had family here in 1920s. They couldn't go inside. They could go up to the 7th step. That was as far as they could go. Since we've come back in 1967, this site is accessible to anybody and everybody, any religion, any nationality. Anybody that wants access to this building today has that access. Our neighbors tell us straight out that if they ever control this, they won't let us in. They say it's a mosque and only Muslims can pray here. Now, I've mentioned to numerous journalists that this building was built by a Jewish king 2,000 years ago, which is about 600 years before Muhammad was born. But that doesn't make any difference. It's a mosque, always has been, always will be. And it's not me saying it. Go into Google, search the name Karl Vick. Karl with a K, K-A-R-L-V-I-C-K, and then the word Hebron. You'll come to a blog that he wrote for Time magazine about a year ago. He had a discussion with the then Arab mayor of Hebron, who says, what? It's a mosque. Everybody knows it's a mosque. Would they let me pray in a synagogue? This is something that not only has he said, but those who preceded him, they all say it, and they mean it. That's why for 7 centuries we couldn't go inside. We know that if we didn't live in Hebron, here, nobody who was not of the Muslim faith would have access to the site. And people say, oh, you don't have to worry, there'll be an agreement, they'll sign it on the White House lawn. So there was an agreement like that about Joseph's tomb in Shechem, and the very ancient, beautiful synagogue in Jericho, Shalom al Yisrael, and even places here in Hebron where we were supposed to have access, and of course we don't. Now there are close to 1 million people, 800,000 people that visit here every year. I can't imagine saying to them, well, can't do it. You know, you have to stand outside and wave. It's too important a place.
But the argument that they would give is, it may have once been built by a Jewish king, but once it becomes a mosque, from that moment forward, it is only a mosque.
Well, so then I have news for them too, because this building twice was a church. Okay, in the 300s, the beginning of Christianity, they built the largest room in the building. It was originally a courtyard. They built a room, it's a basilica. And then in the 600s, the early Muslims came in and turned it into a mosque. And then the Crusaders came back and turned it into a church. Look, the very idea, you know, there's something which I've realized, which we're accused of this kind of stubbornness and this. I asked a group a few days ago, if you want to go to visit, you're traveling around the world and you want to go visit in Medina, will that let you into Medina? It's against Islamic law. Anybody who's not Muslim can't go into Medina. Temple Mount. I can't go up in Temple Mount and say prayers. They play football up there. They play soccer up there. They throw literal around the place, and I can't go up there and say some psalms, even because they say there was never a temple there. So you want to say, so they built the Dome of the Rock, and from then on in, these are the very basic, fundamental right of freedom to worship at a holy place. They say you can't do it. Why do they say that? They say, of course they're going to say it, it's a mosque to keep me out, because they say that none of this land belongs to me either. All of Eretz Yisrael is what they call Palestine, and I have a map in my office of Palestine, printed by the Palestinian Authority in Bethlehem. Not Hebron. Tel El-Arabi is Tel Aviv. So as far as they're concerned, I can't not only be here, but I can't be in Tel Aviv.
Yes. And that's the problem.
So why I, as a Jew, can't come visit and pray at the first Jewish holy site in Israel?
And you would think anybody with a liberal perspective would fight for the right for Jew, Christian, and Muslim all to be able to come here. You would think that, wouldn't you?
These stones here, you know, you've probably done programs about the wall. If you go through the tunnels, you see the same exact kind of stone there that you see here. A stone with a frame around it, very large stones, because they were put there by the same person at the same time. We're talking about the Herodian days 2,000 years ago. The stairs, the 7th step used to be up here where the bench is, and this is where Jews could pray for 700 years.
Right here is where the 7th step used to be.
Yeah, sure. And right now the sunlight is a little difficult, but you could still see on the wall here some of the markings where the stairs used to be. They used to go up here, and this is as far as people could go.
And the steps once went all the way up?
They went up to the entrance here. There are 3 entrances to the building. The one over here today is closed, but they went up here. There used to be an arch right here in front of us. There were stairs below that and stairs coming up, and this was about as far as Jews could go.
But as I see this arch above me, that was an entrance?
There is an entrance that goes into the building from there.
And at one point, Jews used to come here. There were no bushes right here.
No.
And we would walk up and enter the cave.
Well, you could theoretically go from there, but again, for 700 years, you could only go about as far as we were standing here.
Because they didn't want Jews to go into the cave.
They wouldn't allow Jews to go inside. They wouldn't allow anybody, not only Jews, they wouldn't let Christians go in. Anybody who was not Muslim couldn't go inside. From the beginning of the last month of the Jewish year, from the beginning of Elul through the end of the Sukkot holidays, we can have between 100 to 150,000 people here. It's an amazing thing. You have, during the music festival, this is packed. People can wait a couple of hours to go inside. The lines are very long, and you have hundreds, if not thousands, of people inside. As many people can be inside at one time. And I invite people to come here. Anybody that wants to see and feel and experience what this is. You know, there are people with spiritual antennas. I don't have them, but there are people that have them. And you know, you come here, people come here and they feel it. They say, wow, you know, like, and it's a big wow because it's a tremendous place, and it's a big privilege to be able to be here, to pray here, to show people the site, and to bring this via you to your audience. Thank you for coming.
This has been extraordinary. You know, it's not about a tour. You really brought America here to Hebron, and as I said at the open, there's so many misconceptions. You know the old phrase, seeing is believing, but in some ways seeing is understanding. And what I've said to people on Shalom TV over and over again is, one really has to come, see, experience. It's so different than the pictures one sees on American CNN, network television. It's so different than one hears or when one reads in the New York Times. And it's been extraordinary to be able to have you sort of introduce us. And this will only be the first time, but make some closing statement for me about what this means and what you feel about not only the Cave of Machpelah, but Hebron in general, but anything you want to say at all. Like, sort of wrap it up for me.
You know, people come, they hear about Hebron, and they come to Hebron, and they see, and it's a city, and there are problems, and I say, you know, it's a really spiritual place, and they have trouble figuring it out. You come here on a Friday night, and we have a Kalbach Shabbos, and people dance for 2 hours here, and you can feel it. We have weddings here. There was a wedding here. You know what it's like to have a wedding chuppah outside here? Somebody's getting married at the place where Yitzchak met Rivka. And it says that, you know, they met in the field. This is the field. Yitzchak met Rivka here. This is where they got married. People getting married here. It's unbelievable. And I just, you know, I invite people to come because what you said is so true. Until you see it.
Yes.
People come, you know, people hear about us. We're the provocateurs of the world. You know, I wear a hat to keep the horns down. And I don't push the button with the fire coming out. But that's what people think. And they come and they see. People don't have to necessarily accept everything, all of my political ideas and opinions. But if they hear them and they at least understand what we really believe and not what somebody else says we believe, and they see where we are and they start to understand. I've had journalists here that haven't printed their stories because it wasn't what they wanted, because they realized it wasn't so black and white. And I invite people to come. Anybody who wants to come, we've never said no to anybody. Anybody that wants to come, see Hebron, take a tour of Hebron, hear, ask questions. That's what we're here for. It's a privilege.
This is a lovely, remarkable human being, David Wilder, who is inviting any one of you, whoever comes to visit the state of Israel, the land of Israel, the Holy Land. Come visit him. How do people get in touch with you if they want to contract with you to give them a tour?
First of all, they can go. People can reserve tours on. We have a New York organization called the Hebron Fund, hebronfund.org, and they can go in. There's a calendar. They can reserve a tour there. They can come email me. My email is very easy: hebron@hebron.com. And I thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure. And I'll look. You know, I know people like it when they come back for more.
I'll be back
for more.
I'll be back for more. This is David Wilder. It's been an honor to bring this edition of Voices of Israel to you. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to anything that David has shown us. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I would love to hear from any of you. And if you want to be in touch with David Wilder yourself, you can do so by either emailing him or email me, and I'll forward your emails on to him. Kol tu b'hatzlacha.
Toda rabah. Shalom, shalom. Shalom, shalom.
For Voices of Israel, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM. To GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.